I'm Dr. Erin Myers, and this is Leading with Intuition, a podcast for the Type A perfectionist woman who knows society needs a reboot and is capable of making it happen. We are redefining success so that we have a balance of energy where work-life integration creates happiness instead of anxiety. A balance of energy that allows the future generations of our society to know the meaning of acceptance without the pressure to conform and achieve. That's what this podcast is all about. So sit back, relax, make sure you follow, download, review, and let's begin. Hi, so for today's podcast, I should say, I want to talk about conflict management because this is something I've been working on with a lot of my one-on-one leadership coaching clients. So conflict management it's integral in society for not only societal conflict, as we are especially seeing right now in our current socio-political situation around the world, but it's also so incredibly important for us as leaders to really understand the different styles of conflict management and what those styles are that each of us take on personally so that we can better recognize it not only in ourselves, but more importantly, in the teams that we lead. Because once we recognize the way in which people, whether it's our peers, our subordinates, those above us, this kind of 360-degree view, once we understand how they handle conflict in a particular manner, it becomes much easier. I was going to use kind of a bigger, more powerful word there, but I'm just going to say easier. Much easier for us to be able to adapt and help lead them and guide them to a different type of conflict management style that is actually going to be a better solution for that particular conflict. I hope that makes sense. And I think it will. If it doesn't yet, I think it will once we tie in all of these concepts. So we're going to talk about these conflict management styles. And there are 5 different conflict management styles. And what I would like us to do, there's actually a conflict management survey that you can complete. I'm going to turn that into a PDF and I will put it in the show notes so that you can access that to really get a feel for your own conflict management style through this survey. But also, I would like us to examine our own conflict management styles as I go through the 5 different styles and think about which one you may be. Now, the other key thing to note here is that we likely situationally choose a conflict management style. So when you think about these conflict management styles, you want to do so through a little bit of a narrow lens. We want to start by thinking about, for example, work-related conflicts. How do we react in work-related situations? Because it could be very different than how we react in family conflicts, just as an example. So think about it through a narrow lens. You can then change your lens to think about your conflict management style from that different perspective, but just start off with one. And then once you've figured that one out, only then move on to the next. Hopefully that makes sense. And if you want to go ahead and download the PDF and take a look at the survey, you'll need to take the survey for every lens. So you can't take it just as a holistic view of yourself. You'll want to take it for each specific lens. So let's go ahead and dive into this. So this conflict management style survey, it's really been designed to help us become more aware of our own characteristic approach or style in managing conflict. So once we complete the survey, I kind of figure out which one of these 5 conflict management styles we are, we can really figure out our typical behavior and our attitudes that arise in particular conflict situations. So let's dive into these 5 different conflict management styles. So the first one is competing or controlling. It's kind of competing / controlling is what it's called. And these individuals, or I shouldn't even say these individuals, because it's not you as a holistic person, right? It's just you situationally in this particular lens of a conflict. So competing controlling reactions or behaviors when it comes to conflict management means that you are very assertive and we are uncooperative. So an individual pursues his or her own concerns at the other person's expense. So we become very almost narcissistic in that we are unbending and unwilling, and we place blame on the other person. So it's a very power-oriented mode. We tend to have this stereotype when it comes to leadership that any powerful leader, the strong, powerful leader, tends to be very competing and controlling when it comes to conflict. It is my way or the highway because I am the boss and that's it. When really that shouldn't be the case. We should be adapting our conflict style depending on the situation that is arising, especially as a leader. But this old stereotype of that hard-nosed boss, we likely have that stereotype, and I do this exercise sometimes as well. What do you visualize when I say boss? What type of person is that? The majority of people tend to have a stereotype of a white older male in a suit in a power pose, kind of leaning forward. And that would be this type of conflict model as well. Now, this kind of conflict style also, although, it's an individual pursuit of power and dominance and controlling the situation, it can be helpful in certain situations. So, for example, when you think of a military type of environment, those military officers and leaders are put up against the law numerous times for the decision that they make, especially in a conflict zone. But there's a reason for that. It's only those that have been well enough trained for particular situations that are allowed to make the executive decisions. And technically, in a conflict style situation, they would be putting on this conflict and controlling hat. But ultimately, they put on that hat and have this power mode at other people's expense because they have been through the training and have the situational awareness needed to make the decision. And so there are some times when this needs to happen, when this type of personality or conflict style needs to arise. So this power-oriented mode, where someone uses whatever power seems appropriate to win their position, to say it's my way or the highway. And they tend to argue based on their rank, their economic status, their political power, whatever it may be. They pull out those cards in order to control the situation. And so competing might mean standing up for your own rights, or it might mean that, hey, I have the background and I'm making this decision because I have the background and you don't. But you are defending regardless. You are defending a position that you believe is correct. Or you are simply trying to win at someone else's expense. So again, this is the competing or controlling conflict style. And then we have accommodating. These individuals tend to be very unassertive. They're very cooperative. It's the exact opposite of competing. It's the other side of the spectrum. So we've got, the controlling, competing, and then we have the accommodating on the other side of the spectrum. So these individuals, they tend to say, and this is something I've been working on with one of my one-on-one coaching clients, is they tend to say, oh, I just want what's best for everyone else. Whatever everyone else decides, that's fine. They don't want to even be a part of the conversation. So they tend to completely neglect their own individual concerns in order to satisfy the concerns of the other person or the other people. So there's an element of just complete self-sacrifice when people are in this mode. So accommodating tends to, or might take the form of just complete selfless generosity or charity, or just simply obeying another person's orders when one would prefer not to, or just yielding to another person's point of view or power. So in the example of the military officer making a just command decision in a conflict situation, the other individuals involved would be considered to be accommodating because they are saying, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, and moving on. So they're accommodating, and the person making the decision in that example would be in the competing or controlling style. So accommodating. whatever is best for everyone else, whatever everybody else wants. Now, the way to snap someone out of this cycle of accommodation is to grant them power. And so, for example, let's say we're all in a board meeting or we're all sitting around a table having a meeting. Instead of waiting until the very end to ask the quiet person what their opinion is, you instead go around the table and ask everybody for their opinion. And everybody gets the same amount of time to voice their opinion. So you may say everybody has 2 minutes to voice their opinion. And what would be best in this situation is if you ask those individuals that you know tend to be accommodating conflict styles, ask them to go first. Then they don't have time to say, yeah, whatever Susie said or whatever John said. We ask them to go first. So we can say, hey, Mitch, let's go ahead. What's your opinion on this? We'll do a round robin. Everybody gets 2 minutes. Mitch, I would like you to go first. And you grant them that power and that opportunity to actually state their opinion from the beginning. Likely at the end of it all, they'll try to backtrack and say, oh, but really it's whatever everybody wants. But at least they have voiced their opinion and you're starting to grant them that power. That's the most important thing in this situation, is to ask them their opinion. So even when they say, yeah, I'm excited about something, you want to go ahead and ask them their permission to share that excitement. So you always want to try to grant them a little bit of power to get them back into the game. All right, then the third type is avoiding. So these people are absolutely unassertive and uncooperative. So they right away, immediately do not want to pursue their own concerns or those of the other person. They just simply want to run the other way. So unlike accommodating, where they're at least there and listening to the whole situation, but they say, yeah, whatever's best for everybody, avoiding people just don't even show up. They literally avoid. It's the physical act of avoidance in this case. So they don't address the conflict at all. They pretend that it doesn't exist. It may take the form of diplomatically sidestepping an issue, postponing an issue until a better time, or simply withdrawing from a threatening situation. So there is complete avoidance here. So again, the difference between accommodating and avoiding: accommodating would at least listen and participate, but then just not voice their own opinion. Avoiding doesn't even show up. Then we have collaborating. So collaborating, these individuals that use the collaborating conflict style in particular situations, they tend to be both assertive as well as cooperative. So it's the absolute opposite of avoiding. They are there, they are in the conflict, and they are cooperating. They're trying to talk through things. They attempt to work with the other person to find some solution that's going to fully satisfy the concerns of both people involved, or all parties involved. It means digging into an issue to identify those underlying concerns of the two individuals. So you're really doing research, you're trying to get all the facts, you're getting all the emotions out as well as the data. You're really digging in to figure out what the best alternative is for everyone involved. And so collaborating between two people tends to take the form of kind of exploring a disagreement to learn from each other's insights, concluding to resolve some condition which would otherwise have them competing for resources, or really just confronting and trying to find a creative solution to an interpersonal problem. So this is a very well accepted and acknowledged form of conflict style. I think that's kind of the terminology I want to use there. And finally, we have compromising. So this is kind of an intermediate between assertiveness and cooperativeness. So compromising is another positively viewed conflict style. And the object here is to find a more expedient, mutually acceptable solution, which partially satisfies both parties. So whereas collaborating, you're really digging in deep. It could take a long time to get all the data, and you're finding the best, most happiest medium for everybody involved. Whereas compromising, you're saying, you know what, we need to get this done a little bit faster. We can't gather all the data, all the emotions. We can't take into consideration every little aspect here. So let's find something that we can at least both agree has some level of a positive outcome for everyone involved. So what is a mutually acceptable solution that partially satisfies both individuals? We can't meet all the way, but we can meet part of the way. And so this tends to fall on middle ground, kind of between that competing and that accommodating. And so compromising gives up more than competing, but less than accommodating. It's kind of that in-between middle ground there. And likewise, it really addresses an issue more directly than avoiding, but it doesn't explore it in as much depth as collaborating. So compromising might mean splitting the difference, exchanging concessions, or seeking a quick middle ground. Okay, so between those 5 different styles of competing or controlling, that's number 1. Number 2 is accommodating. Number 3 is avoiding. Number 4 is collaborating. And number 5 is compromising. Where do we see ourselves as leaders? In general, which one do you consider your main conflict style that you lean on as a leader? And again, chances are we're going to change it based on the situation, but what's the majority that we tend to lean on for work-related conflicts? And then, because we look at leadership from a holistic perspective, I would like us to also consider what's the one we tend to lean on more for family conflicts? What about social conflicts? And then what tends to be our opinion in the political arena when it comes to the world and societal conflicts? Because we have our own social conflicts with our friend circle. But what about the world? Economic conflict, societal conflict, political conflict that arises around the world. Where do we tend to see that our viewpoint falls under? Do we prefer when politicians use collaborating? Do we prefer when it's more of a militaristic approach and it's more of that competing or controlling? What is our preference? So I encourage us to go ahead. You can pause this podcast and just stop and think about that. Where do I fall between everything? But really take the time to think about that, because chances are we are different, at least in a few areas of our life. Okay, with that, I hope this helped kind of provide some perspective on conflict management styles, and particularly how we might utilize them in leadership type of situations. And ultimately, the goal is to have this situational leadership where we adapt our conflict style depending on the situation and what is going to work best based on the information that we know as a leader. So with that, I'll leave it. I will put that survey where you can really take it and dive in a little bit deeper with the situations. I'll put that PDF in the show notes. And I look forward to hearing your feedback on this podcast and what you would like to hear about next. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and thank you so much for listening. Please give this podcast some love by following it, downloading it, writing a review. Whatever platform you're on, there's a different interaction there. Go ahead and take that if you don't mind, just so we can continue to provide information and support that is needed and wanted for you, our audience. Thank you.